Hi, and welcome to the X22 Report Spotlight. Today we have a new guest, Dr. Shiva. Dr. Shiva created email at the age of 14. He has 4 degrees from MIT. 1 degree is a PhD in biological engineering. He is running for the Senate this year, and I am very happy and honored to have Dr. Shiva on the X22 Report Spotlight. Dr. Shiva, welcome to the Spotlight.
Great, Dave. Thanks to have me on your show, and best to your entire audience.
Yes, thanks for being here. And I just wanted to start off with saying that your climate scam explanation of the Paris Accord was absolutely fantastic. I have that playing on my website, and it really broke it down, and it really explained what was going on. And I really thank you for that. And I wanted to start off with coronavirus. Now, the mainstream media, they're pushing panic, fear, chaos. A lot of people that I speak to, they're enjoying themselves now. They're out bike riding, walking. They don't feel like, anything's really going on. But, we keep hearing all these different numbers, millions of people infected, millions of people sick. What, in your view, what is going on here with coronavirus? Because people are having different ideas of what is going on here, and I wanted to get your take on this.
Yes, so Dave, it's a great question. So what I hope to do, Dave, is first of all, I think it's a great opportunity whenever something like this happens, is to just take 2 steps back before we take 1 step forward and really say what is going on. And I think that's a central question. And to answer that question, we need to go adopt a way of looking at the world so we don't get blinded. Right. So this is where philosophy matters to how you actually perceive a situation. And what you find, there's 2 ways to look at any situation, right? One is you look at the immediate issue and you try to take what's called a reductionist approach. And I'll explain that. The other is you really try to understand the whole, what's called a systems approach. And the best analogy I can give of that is if you think about, there's a very old story, the parable of the king who invites 6 blind men. And he brings in an elephant, and he asks the blind men, what do they quote unquote see? Right? They're blind. And the guy who touches the tail of the elephant thinks it's a brush. The guy who bumps into the leg thinks he's bumped into an oak tree. The guy who touches a trunk thinks it's a hose or something, and so on. Right? So they each have a blinded view of reality, and then they build their narratives based on that. I would argue those in power do not want us to ever see the elephant. They want us to see this blinded view of reality. And that's called a reductionist approach. And this is what happens historically when people in power want to use quote unquote science to hide the larger piece. So when you look at this issue, we need to look at the whole elephant. And the elephant here is the immune system. Okay. What is the immune system? And is it so frail, right? Is the immune system so frail that a virus can destroy it? And that's the central question. So if you look at the way the media handles it, and if you look at the way the medical establishment treats it, and I don't mean to blame doctors or any of the frontline medical workers at all, but particularly the medical school education for doctors, Dave, it's based on a big pharma medical education model. So the doctor going in, 2 years he does book study, and then 2 years he comes out. They don't really understand the immune system. If you, in fact, ask your doctor friends, how does this all work? And they will probably tell you, well, oh yeah, I'm sort of reducing this. The virus will destroy your body, right? And what the vaccine does, it blocks that destruction. Okay. But the reality is, to allay fears and to really put this on well-grounded science, what you find is that the immune system is a very complex system that is made of multiple subsystems. It contains the innate immune system, the interferon system, the adaptive, the microbiome, all of our beautiful gut bacteria, the virome, nearly 380 trillion viruses we have, 60 trillion bacteria, and the gut-brain axis, including our brain. So it's a very complex system, much more complex than what was understood at the time the National Vaccine Act was passed in 1962 by Kennedy. However, people still believe that the immune system, the way it works, is a virus comes in and then it attacks our immune system and starts attacking our cells. This is the reality. The reality is that in the normal condition, which is for most of us, and that's why we've survived and we're still here. We grew up among microbes and bacteria and viruses, is that a pathogen comes in, your body recognizes it using what's called the innate system, the mucous membranes and a whole set of infantry, and it tries to knock it out there. And if it can't do it there, whether it does it there or not, over the next 72 hours, your body goes into what's called the adaptive immune system, creating antibodies. But that's not it. There's whole other things that take place with your genetic changes, as well as your microbiome changing. But the bottom line is, in the normal course, your body's getting these pathogens. It fights back and it resolves itself. It's called resilience. However, if people are not running on all 6 cylinders, right, and if only, let's say, a couple of them have been knocked out, parts of your immune system, through bad eating, lots of high sugar diets, which create candida, which create gliotoxins, which, take out your macrophages or your T cells, well, guess what happens? Your body, in its infinite wisdom, tries to still protect itself. So it'll start using maybe 2 of its cylinders, right? And they overreact, Dave. And that overreaction of a dysfunctional and weakened immune system will not only try to attack the virus particle by trying to explode its cell wall and break it up, but it will also try to find parts of that virus particle, the shedding pieces, if it finds them in other parts of your body, and it'll go attack that. So in the case of Ebola, as I've shared before, if you look at your arterial endothelial tissue, sometimes the Ebola virus particle or the particles goes there and your body goes and attacks it. That's why you start bleeding from inside. In the case of the coronavirus, it goes to your epithelial cells in your lung. You follow what I'm saying? So
Yes.
It's not, it's your overreaction of your own body that's doing it. And why does that overreaction occur? Is because of various things. It could be genetic, it could be epigenetic, but it could be that you've been eating garbage most of your life, that you've compromised your immune system. It could be that you have diabetes. It could be you're taking monoclonal antibodies, or as you age. Now, when you age, your thyroid function goes down. Well, why is that an issue? Because when your thyroid function goes down, you don't produce enough vitamin A. And guess what vitamin A is? It's a hormone which literally builds, quote unquote, walls around your cell to protect any pathogens from coming in. And on top of it, if you're not getting enough vitamin D is an amazing nutrient. We get it from the sun. It's the best way to get it. If you can't, you get it from the fatty fish, right? The salmon, the sardines. But your body uses vitamin D. Think of that as a musket to create a very powerful chemical called cathelicidins. These are like bullets. And these bullets literally poke holes in the walls of a bacteria or in the walls of the walls of viruses, and it basically destroys them. So what you're really looking at, if you want to look at the large picture, the immune system needs certain nutrients. When it has those nutrients, your body functions beautifully, takes care of itself. If you deplete yourself of these nutrients, your body becomes immunosuppressed, or you have other types of diseases. So I hope that's clear, that background. And it really needs to be corrected, because none of the people around the president of the United States are sharing this at all. Everything is vaccines, 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 forgetting that the immune system, most of us are fine. We get viruses all day. We build antibodies and we move forward. We got 380 trillion viruses right now in our body. So the coronavirus is it's a flu virus. It's a variation of the SARS virus. It has a higher infectivity rate and a lower mortality rate, but it is a virus and our body knows how to deal with it. However, if you have immunocompromised people, like people who are older, et cetera, those are the people, like if you look in Italy, I think the median age is 80 years old. That's who it's at, and that's what viruses go after, right? They go after things. They too are a species trying to fight for their existence, or they're not really a species, but they're a microbe. And that's what's going on. So the issue is, why are we shutting down the entire country for this phenomenon when we don't shut down the country? The fact 600,000 people die of heart disease every year.
That is
right?
true.
Right. So we're looking at, and when things don't add up rationally, you must start looking at what the real agenda is. As one of my mentors said, when things don't add up, there's another agenda.
So why do you think, shouldn't also, like the mainstream media, shouldn't they investigate? When I look at like Central Park and all these hospital setups, most of it is empty. There's no one around. It like, to me, that, and people have been taking pictures of hospitals, and it's not what they're making it out to be. It's not as bad as they're saying. But why are they keep pushing it as that this is, the worst thing we've ever seen?
Well, Dave, what I think is going on is a three-part. One of the tweets I put out, the first one about 2 or 3 weeks ago, which went viral, discussed this. I said, as an MIT PhD in biological engineering, I believe, who study the immune system, this fear mongering serves three purposes. One is to crash the economy. Two is to support, mandated vaccines. And I think the other one was essentially to create this environment where you could essentially push an agenda for big pharma, So that's what fundamentally is going on. And I'm sorry, suppress dissent. That was the third one. So if you go back 6 months ago, what was going on globally? We had people in France, massive protests. Remember that?
Yes.
People in Hong Kong, massive protests, right? China. In Wuhan 6 months ago, which the press has not really brought out, there were anti-pollution protests by the Chinese people, right where this virus was released. Throughout China, people like us, the people, not the Communist Party of China, actually wants better health for their kids. China has a massive garbage problem. They can't burn enough of their garbage, so they started building massive incinerators. There was supposed to be a big incinerator plant going in Wuhan. And, in China, it's not like you can go protest and you're fine. You get shot or you get thrown in jail. You're a dissident. Well, 10,000 people came out, which is quite extraordinary. The police brutally attacked them. The people continued. And finally, the Communist Party there said, okay, we're not going to build it. But it's quite interesting, Dave, that event occurred right in Wuhan and was continuing. In New Jersey and all across this country, there's been a huge movement for medical freedom. We won one of the major legislative issues in New Jersey, where I led a massive protest to tell people they should go bottoms up. And that occurred on January 13th. You had protests in South Africa, Venezuela, two populist prime ministers and presidents get elected over the last 3 years, Modi in India, who came from bottoms up, and Trump. So you have a very interesting phenomenon taking place, anti-establishment movements broadly, right? And that's one phenomenon. You have the fact that those in power did not like these movements, and you have the fact they frankly didn't like Trump. So that's sort of the background of what's taking place. So when you look at the virus, right, people attempted in the United States to take out Trump with the Russian collusion, then was impeachment. And this in many ways was a well thought out approach, because what you're really seeing here is that you're using two of the most powerful vehicles of fear and ignorance. And big pharma, the deep state of big pharma, you look at all their ads, Dave, you're right. Most people don't know what is diabetes, but they make massive fear of it. And then they paint you a utopia, right? If you see those ads, after you take this pill, you're amazing and beautiful music, etc. Well, in my view, this is one of the biggest chess moves of the three entities which want a centralized power, essentially at a global state level. And I want to walk people through something so this doesn't become something that's something conspiratorial, but it's actually just evidence when you look at it. 5 years ago, in 2015, the UN laid out what was called Sustainable Development Goals 3. It was their version 3, which was essentially saying that we want to create a utopia. And it's 17 points, Dave, and they lay out their utopia. Okay. People should go type in SDG 3, Sustainable Development Goals. And it's a document, and you can see it. It lays out these goals of how we're going to get. It's their criteria: no income inequality, we solve climate, no more poverty, gender equality for everyone, on and on and on. So that's this big utopia. But what's fascinating is there's another document that goes with that called IA 2030, and you know what it says, Dave? The way that we're going to achieve that utopia is by vaccinating everyone. Okay, so immunization for all, leave no one behind. And it's quite fascinating. They have little icons that represent the 17 goals. And for 14 of those 17 icons, they say how vaccination or immunization helps us achieve that. Okay, even though there's no direct correlation, they've, very nice woven it in. And then if you find out who was supportive of these SDG goals, you find out it's the Institute of, Federation of Pharmaceutical Manufacturers, who are the three executive members of that are from Roche, Shinogi, which is a Japanese big pharma company, and Eli Lilly. And then if you look at those three companies, what you realize is that all of those three companies, in fact, most of big pharma today is suffering economically because the drugs, the old drug development model, Dave, the synthetic compound that doesn't exist in nature, in order to make that a drug, they have to, first of all, do test tube research and kill a ton of animals. That takes 6 years. Then they have to get regulatory approval by the FDA before they start testing on humans. Phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. This process, Dave, takes about $5 billion. And what comes out at the end of that has side effects, and you and I can sue pharma companies. So pharma companies have been feeling the pinch because massive amount of cost, and they're highly liable, right? You and I can sue them. Now take the alternative, vaccines. By the 1986 law that was passed, spearheaded by Ted Kennedy, his brother John Kennedy in 1962 created the National Vaccination Act, which created the CDC. Mm-hmm. And that was at a time when we had a very minimalistic understanding of the immune system. But based on that, we decided we need to vaccinate everyone, and the CDC was going to set up guidelines. Well, by 1986, a lot of people were getting injured. 1,000 lawsuits were taking place, 5 lawsuits a day. And the lobbyists and the lawyers and the politicians, in order to protect their buddies in big pharma, what they did, Dave, was they literally created a vaccine court, which means they essentially destroyed the Constitution, right? No more separation of powers. They took the judicial powers under the Health and Human Services. So if your child, something awful happened to them, they would have to go to a vaccine court where the limitation of liability for death was limited to $250,000. Okay?
Wow.
So what did this do? And this was brought to you by Ted Kennedy. Now, Reagan signed it very unwittingly because he said, I didn't want to do it, but they shoved that provision into another bill, which was quite favorable for other reasons. So what we have created, therefore, is a big, big opportunity for pharmaceutical companies. No liability, no risk. They can't get sued, Dave. And the development of a vaccine does not need to go through the same regulatory structures as a drug because they categorize it as a biologic. Okay? So what you have is you have an amazing opportunity for big pharma. Low risk. Don't have to do a lot of testing. We can push this out there. You follow what I'm saying?
I follow you, yes.
At the massive level of the United Nations, you painted a utopia. Now look, pharma companies have a history of using nonprofits. They have a history of manipulating narratives to act as though they're doing good for the welfare of you and me and everyone, when in reality, it's about creating a distribution point. A very good friend of mine used to be not a very good friend of mine, a person I know introduced me to a very interesting PR company called Burson Marsteller. In a previous life, about 20 years ago, I created a company to analyze email, to figure out trends in emails. And this crisis management PR firm wanted to use my technology for their clients, right? So they could detect if something was going on, so they could act. And one of the guys that I met was a senior account manager at this PR company. I think they're one of the top PR companies in the world. When major stuff occurs, they go to them. And he, over dinner, I said, what do you consider one of your proudest moments? He goes, oh, the day I helped Eli Lilly. I go, what'd you do for them? He goes, well, their Prozac sales were dropping, and no one was, starting because of side effects. People were stopping to buy their drugs. And so he goes, what I went in there, I rebranded them. I forgot what their slogan was. It was some drug slogan. And he changed their slogan to something like, we help people's lives. And then he goes, I did something even more interesting. He goes, I had Eli Lilly create a couple of nonprofits. One of the nonprofits was for battered women. And then that nonprofit would take out ads, Dave, which would say, do you want, do you know if your friend, targeted women, is being beaten by her husband? Okay. Or do you know anyone who's being beaten? Please make sure they take their Prozac.
Wow.
So what you're seeing is, and so what do they do? And this is very, very quite insidious, but you create some nonprofit, some thing that seems beneficial that everyone would want to support, right? Like the puppy dog sale, right? And that's what has happened here. When you unravel this, the United Nations, a quote unquote nonprofit, the WHO, the CDC, All these guys are essentially frontmen for pharma. And that is what Fauci is. He's a frontman for pharma. And if you look at this model, just follow the money of the Gates Foundation, totally pro-vaccine. Hillary Clinton, totally pro-vaccine. And then you have the Zuckerbergs, Chan, and they just put $6 billion into a foundation. So you have three major foundations, which are basically ways of, avoiding taxes, right? They're tax evaders,
right?
Putting into their own ways where they can act as though they're helping us, the poor, doing a neo-missionary model. And as a result of that, those three organizations, the CDC, the WHO, with their front man Fauci, who's the one who created the fake science narrative that HIV creates AIDS. That's how he made his entire fear mongering. This is his second rodeo in doing this. So that is what's going on. It's fundamentally big pharma. And you have the Chinese supporting it, who have their political goals, right? So you have the Chinese, the three major foundations in the world, who are all pro-vaccine, pro-Monsanto, etc. And you have the World Health Organization and the CDC. This is sort of it's not even, this is the deep state, okay?
So are you saying that this was coordinated between all these organizations with pharma? I mean, this is not an accident.
Definitely. No, this is not an accident.
Okay.
Look, this coordination sometimes is implicit, sometimes it's explicit. It's 1,000 monkeys thing, right? When one monkey learns something, they sort of telepathically pass it on. This is sort of they're sort of the incestuous clique, right? It's like when you're in a group, right? Dave, it's groupthink, right? There's sort of an understanding, hey, this guy doesn't belong in our group, right? This is how the swarm moves, right? When you watch birds flying in a swarm, it's sort of directly controlled, but otherwise there's sort of an implicit understanding of how things work. Fauci, for example, is on the leadership council of the Gates Foundation. Okay.
Oh, that's very interesting.
Right. So what you're looking at here is, and Fauci came in with Reagan times. He's the one who protected his buddy Robert Gallo, who was brought up on scientific misconduct charges. He's the one who stole the HIV virus from the French to create a bogus HIV test, and they conflated HIV to AIDS. Okay, that's what they did. When AIDS is suppression of the immune system, which you don't even need AIDS to take place, HIV to take place. 60% of Zambia has HIV. No one's dying of AIDS. It was one of the biggest frauds done in science. The only guy at the time who called them out was Peter Duesberg. Peter's one of the most eminent scientists, the first guy ever to get tenure at a young age of 29 or something, 39 at Berkeley, one of the youngest guys in the National Academy of Sciences. He's the one who called out Fauci. But Fauci came to the aid of Gallo. Gallo went into the background, and Fauci built his career on the HIV AIDS causality when there is none. That's what took place. That's Fauci's history. And then remember, he did all the AIDS concerts, started rubbing shoulders with Hollywood, etc. This guy is a total front man, and no one will call him out, Dave. You know why? Because all the academics, many of them who I, went to school with, studied with, they all have to pay homage to people like Fauci because they control their grant funding. That's what's going on. So this is, I look at this and I say it's total bullshit, because the immune system cannot be destroyed by a virus. It's the exact opposite. It's a compromised and weakened immune system which goes haywire and attacks you. The virus is just an initiator of sort of like an allergic reaction. You follow what I'm saying?
Yes.
That's what's going on here. And Fauci knows this. The problem is, unfortunately, President Trump doesn't know this. No one's advising him. But this is one of the biggest opportunities. This is like the payday for pharma. So if they have to crash our economy, with $4 trillion having us print money, what's the result they get? Well, imagine every man, woman, and child, all 7 billion people, extracting about $1,000 a year for them. You're looking at a $7 trillion payback.
So this is their ultimate plan. This is
because they're not. Look, it's an industry that's failing. When I started my company, Cytosolve, look, I've been involved in health since I was a kid, okay? I grew up in India where my grandmother was a traditional healer. She could observe your face, figure out what's going on, and she would figure out the right food, the right medicines for you. It's an ancient system of medicine. That's what got me motivated in medicine. Dave, I came to the United States as a 7-year-old kid. By the time I was 14, I busted my butt, finished calculus as a 9th grader, which was unheard of in those days. I wasn't just a nerd. I played baseball and soccer and a Division III halfback. So I wasn't just a nerd, but the point is I was very hardworking, man, very motivated. And I started working full time at a medical school, Dave, as a 14-year-old kid, as a research fellow. I've been doing medical research for nearly 45 years, 43 years now. So it's been my passion, and separate from inventing the email system and doing a bunch of high tech stuff. But in 2003, my love of medicine and IT came together when I went back to MIT in 2003, because a new field was emerging in biology called biological engineering. Mm-hmm. And biological engineering was using engineering systems principles to understand the body. And as a part of that, I created a technology called CYTO, C-Y-T-O, Solve, which is a new platform, even more important than email in many ways, to use the computer to model diseases on the computer, Dave. And using that, we could literally start eliminating the need for animal testing. So when I look at this from a systems perspective, I study the immune system all day. I just gave the distinguished lecture 4 months ago at the National Science Foundation, the invited lecture. I'm considered one of the experts. So the difference is I don't know anything to MIT or Harvard or the NIH because I made my own money and I fund my own research. But most of these guys, Dave, they have to keep their mouth shut, and they don't have the level of, and if they have the credentials that I do, they're practicing the oldest profession right now.
Let me just go back for a sec. When this first started, why were they pushing testing so hard? I mean, Hillary Clinton was out there saying everyone has to get tested. Everyone has to get tested. Why were they pushing these tests so hard?
Yeah, it's a good question, right? Well, first of all, they probably had their buddies who were creating the tests, like Abbott came out with a test, right? So part of the whole, remember, in the medical world, there are 3 ways they make money. One is what's called biomedical devices, which are diagnostics, okay, testing. The second way is vaccines, and the third way is what we call drugs. So you obviously, whenever an issue comes, you want testing. It's a lot of money, Dave. Companies like Siemens and Abbott, these guys make a tremendous amount of billions of dollars from testing. That's one thing. The other piece of value in testing is that whoever does the testing can control the narrative, right? Because then you can determine what is a false positive, what's a false negative. In the testing aspect, you have to understand there's 2 things that are controlled by the WHO. When you go to a doctor's office and they test you for something, Dave, that's called the diagnostic piece. And then they have to find the procedure. So what they have is they have a bunch of codes for every test, okay? So whatever the diagnosis is, that goes into a testing diagnostic code. Guess who develops those codes? The World Health Organization, WHO. So, and then in the United States, the procedure that you do is owned by the AMA. These codes, Dave, they are licensed to the IT people, so they have to pay a royalty to the WHO. So when she said testing, it's not only the devices, but it's saying, let's come up with codes. So the WHO came up with 2 codes, as I understand, for COVID, okay? One code was that you absolutely positively test for it, right? Well, so WHO creates the code, and then the vaccine or the biomedical devices manufacturers, whoever does it, gets the business. You follow what I'm saying? For that test.
Yes.
Then, so in the case of COVID, they created one test, which was you absolutely had COVID, okay? Through a test. The second was, well, it's sort of squishy, right? Well, he quacks like a duck. We think very squishy. That was the second code, which gave them flexibility to sort of throw everything into the kitchen sink in there. You see what I'm saying? So in Italy, 38% of the people are over the age of 65. Some guy walks in and he's breathing heavy. COVID, second code. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So this is a way to cook the books. And in the United States, a very good friend of mine who works in one of the leading hospitals, she said she was part of an email chain where the CDC sent an email to the hospital administrators encouraging them, well, it doesn't matter what code you do, just basically encouraging them to put everything, even if it wasn't in code 2, into code 1. And so if someone died and they had the test sometimes takes 14 days, they said, well, it's sort of COVID, the first code. So you have a lot of the cooking of the books going on, but the important thing to understand is the WHO is the one who creates a framework for those test codes, okay? And then the CDC is the one who implements it in the United States. So you have, and by the way, if you look at the CDC and the people who are in the CDC, they're literally revolving door people between pharma.
So this whole thing was set up from the testing to the fear mongering. I mean, this was a
Well,
gigantic coordinated effort.
well, this is, you have to understand, it's like who shot Kennedy, right? It's an interesting, was it a conspiracy or was it an implicit understanding, right? The deep state sort of just said, well, he's not one of us, right?
Right.
Maybe they knew. So what I'm saying is, it's not, I'm not going to say this happened, but it's an implicit understanding. These people all hang out together, man. They all screw each other, okay? They're one incestuous group, seriously.
But isn't it, I mean, I understand why they're doing this, but bringing down the economy and bringing down not just the U.S. economy, the global economy.
Well, yeah, but look who benefits from this, China. Look, China can buy anyone. Do you think that China can't buy the Clinton Global Foundation? Do you think the Clintons are not for sale? Think about it, okay? All of these people are for sale. China owns so much of our reserve dollar. So think about, so what's happened is, look at what's happened right now. $2 trillion, $6 trillion is actually going to be put out through quantitative easing, which is the crack model that Obama created to save the banks. And where will that money go? It's going to go to the point, it's going to be the biggest transfer of wealth to prop up the stock market. And a certain amount of that will go down for the trade deficits, where those dollars will go to China. Now, China can then use those dollars to buy the U.S. at a song, right? When you crash the economy. So what you see, but go back to the pharma piece. Okay, so it's a let's say $6 trillion investment. But look at what happens with the concept of mandated medicine. Next year, at this time, Dave, the following takes place, right? Oh my God, we got this horrible flu. What's going to happen? You've made drones of at least 50% of the educated elites here. And they're going to say, of course, Dave, you better get vaccinated. You know, I'm going to make sure you get vaccinated. So you can't even get your driver's license. Maybe you can't even go to your gym. Maybe you can't see your dentist. You see where this is going?
Yes.
All of this is a pretext separate from the economy for creating an enforcement model where you may be forcibly be vaccinated or you'll be quarantined to your home. Now, this is not that far-fetched, because less than 2 weeks ago, 2 Thursdays ago, the Danish government, which is, by the way, remember I talked to you about the Sustainable Development Goals? Mm-hmm. Sweden, Denmark, and France are the top 3 who the UN holds up as exemplars of practicing the Sustainable Development Goals. Well, Denmark just passed a midnight ruling that they have the right to go and not only test you, but treat you, vaccinate you with police force in your home.
Wow.
All right. So what I'm trying to tell you is the anti-vaccine movement was growing in this country, the medical freedom movement. Hey, I want to take vitamins. I don't want to take supplements. I don't want to take your crap, right? Bottoms up. I'm going to take, this is my body. So that movement was gloriously growing by the fact that we won a major, I led one of the big protests down in New Jersey, and we won that. We stopped the vaccine bill from going through. That literally occurred on January 6th through 13th, Dave, literally around the time this coronavirus fear-mongering takes place. So you have dissent that's been taking place all over the world, right? Populist leaders being elected. Now this is we don't hear about anything about Hong Kong, right? It's gone. We don't hear anything about France. We don't hear anything about anything.
Right.
So it's been an amazing opportunity for these guys to hit 3 shots in one, right? Get ready to enforce medical mandates, control dissent, in fact, suppress it, and squash the economy, which makes it a little more tenuous for Trump to get elected. Well orchestrated by the same forces who don't like anti-establishment movements. And it's all based on fake science.
Dr. Shiva, let me throw this out to you. When Trump first came on the scene, he mentioned hydroxychloroquine and other drugs that go. And the mainstream media, they went crazy over this. They did not like him mentioning this. Now the FDA has approved it for emergency use. I saw the former, I forgot who he was, but he came out and said they're getting great results from it. Is this, Trump said this could be a game changer, and it's starting to seem like this could really help. Now, will this help? And if it does,
right. So
go ahead.
Yes. So the issue is, look, one of the purposes I hope your audience and your viewers will take from this is go back to the central principles of the immune system. Your body when you take care of it, goes into its own homeostasis and it will protect you. The immune system is the operating system of the body. So when the body's systems are functioning right, your immune health is supported. So the real issue here, if I have to repeat it a billion times, is your immune health. So that's what we want to focus on, Dave. That's the eye on the prize, right? So how does your immune health get compromised? Well, one way is you have massive amounts of candida in you, too much microbes, okay? You're exposed to too much garbage all the time, and your body's constantly fighting, and it's immunocompromised. Does that make sense? It's like you're constantly firing on all cylinders all the time, trying to protect yourself, okay? Well, so the goal is so for example, if people eat a lot of sugars, your body will produce candida. That candida results in toxins, gliotoxins, which actually knock out two of your 6 or 8 cylinders in your immune system, the macrophages and your T cells. Okay, so that's one thing to understand. So these anti-parasitic or anti-malarials or zithromax antibiotics, what I believe and I understand from the science of it, the way they work is you're lowering your bacterial load. You follow me? So if someone's been eating crap and they got a lot of candida and parasites in their body, this stuff is going to help them in a temporary situation because you're reducing the bacterial microbe load, parasite load, so your body's immune system is not fighting, it's getting some support. Does that make sense? So it can get back into its homeostasis.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
So, however, that is not a long-term solution for immune health, because if you keep taking Zithromax for the next 365 days, you're going to destroy your gut bacteria, you see?
Right.
And you can't be always taking this stuff. So, but remember, pharma guys do not want any alternative solution because vaccines are that's their eye on the prize, okay? So if our eye on the prize is immune health, so we have a crisis situation. Well, in this crisis situation, these two things could be valuable, but it's not going to help us long term. But more importantly, there are other opportunities. I wrote a letter to President Trump, as you may know, and I made it public. In that letter, I said, here's my plan for immune and AND_ health. We don't have to choose between one or the other. And it said, let's practice modern medicine, and which means let's practice precision and personalized medicine. One size does not fit all. So let's take all those people with COVID-19 and give them massive high dosage of vitamin D, 400,000 IU, vitamin A, 400,000 IU for 2 days, and 50,000 IUs of vitamin D. Now, why is this important? By the way, these dosages are pediatric dosages that were given when kids get, particularly the vitamin A, when kids get measles, and you want to get rid of it faster. So you give people this oomph, okay? Because the vitamin D is an antimicrobial. The vitamin A builds structures around their cells to protect themselves from viruses. So that's for the COVID-19 people. The people who have that and are in critical care, for that matter, in critical care in any ICU, you got to give them that, plus give them a drip of 100 grams of vitamin C. Again, this is all well-established, extremely highly efficacious. How much? Pennies, okay? Then you take the people who are immunocompromised, the people with diabetes and AIDS and COVID, CVID and all the people are taking the monoclonal antibodies. Those people, the good thing we support them is, again, with the vitamin A and vitamin D, support them with vitamin C, and those people should be careful of who they're interacting with. Hand washing obviously is good in any way, okay? And the last group, Dave, is the healthy people, which is like 90% of us.
Right.
Let's give ourselves a shield, 5,000 to 10,000 units of vitamin D, vitamin A, make sure your iodine levels are good, and get back to work. That's what we should be doing. This is what a systems guy does. This is what engineers do, not a Fauci. Fauci is incentivized to support the fear mongering. He did it once before with HIV and AIDS. He's a master at it. And that's what he's up to right now.
So how long do you think this will go? How long do you think, because we have Trump, it's funny because there's two different opinions here. Trump saying that he thinks this is going to be over very, very quickly, and Fauci saying that this might go on for a very long time. So both of them are saying two different things.
Yeah, the dialectic here is that you have a guy who is pharma's frontman. He controls academic lives. This is Fauci I'm talking about. He, we saw the WikiLeaks stuff praising, Hillary Clinton. He's very close to the Gates and all these foundations. So, and he's been there during Obama. He's been there during the Bushes. He's been there during Reagan. This guy's a lifer. Okay, he is deep state. He's deep state pharma.
Hmm.
Right. It's like the old, academics. It's interesting. Presidents come and go, but academics are almost there. They're like the Sith Lord, from Star Wars.
Yes.
Right. They're always there in the back room.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what Fauci is. He's Emperor Fauci, and he is using health policy, a purposely misguided health policy, to have the economists do the economic policy in the back end. This is extremely well thought out, and he's banking on the ignorance of the American people and the ignorance of the president. And look, I can tell you that I've gotten some very positive feedback from amazing economists who saw my videos and they said, Shiva, keep doing it, because what's happening is Fauci is literally destroying our economy, heading it into a depression. I think, look, President Trump is not stupid. He's aware of this. I'm sure there's things that he's doing on the economic side I'm not fully aware of, but I can tell you that you have an individual who has big pharma ties, who with WHO, CDC, and by the way, the CDC, I don't know if you know, works very closely with China, has a history of this.
No, I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah. So you have the China. What are we headed to becoming? When China has 200 million cameras everywhere, we want to put cameras everywhere. We want people to potentially have little fingerprints, whether they got their vaccines or not. This is China 2.0. Are we going to become a colony of China?
So what this sounds like to me is like this is the deep state, their like last push to get everything they wanted.
Exactly, man. You nailed it. That's what I'm saying. There's a very interesting anthropologist said in the first 20 years of any major country, any country or any civilization is when the trajectory of that civilization is decided, whether it goes to the dark ages or the golden age. And I think he studied over 20 centuries. And we're right at that point, Dave. We're right at that inflection point. And then the dark age looks like this, right? Where it's all mandated, where you have technology being used to monitor everything we do. We have no freedom. And that's what this issue is about, all the way down to the last oasis that we have, which is our bloodstream being owned by top-down governance. You won't be able to travel. Now, the golden age looks like this. It's a bottoms-up world. We trust human beings to make the right decisions for themselves because they actually, by the time you and I got up this morning, Dave, we made about 100 decisions for ourselves, right? Without the state being involved.
Yes.
And the profit and the power and control of the state into our lives is a real division, I mean. And that's what this is about. I mean, you create a substantial fear. You hide the real truth about how the immune system works. Using those two things, man, you can own people completely. And that's what we're seeing right now. And that's why I feel very fortunate to have gotten the incredible education I got from a kid in this country and working very hard, that I feel it as an important, noble duty to, I do 2 to 3 videos now explaining to people the science, exposing Fauci. And that's why, that's why you see his reaction. He knows I know what he's up to, and that I'm willing to call him out on it.
It's funny because when I watch him, his reaction and his explanations, it doesn't even make sense half the time. And what he's talking about.
Yeah. People should ask him, show me, Peter Duesberg said, look, I'll shoot the HIV virus into me. He created the biggest fear mongering, man. This is his second rodeo. He wants to ride into the sunset with this one.
So for my last question, I'm just going to throw this out there. Do you think there are cures for most of these diseases like AIDS, cancer? Because we've gone on a very long time, especially with cancer, a very long time with
people make a lot of money prolonging these. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. That, I mean, a huge amount of businesses were started from this. Do you think that they've been hiding this stuff, the cures, and they know of cures?
Well, if you go back to systems thinking, systems principles, right? When I finished my PhD in 2007, Dave, I went back to India for a 2-year Fulbright to actually study the origins of traditional systems of medicine. And what I discovered, Dave, was the traditional systems of medicine are actually not systems of medicine. They actually view the body as an engineering system. And if you look at the words they use, They match one-to-one with engineering systems theory. I wrote a very famous paper on this, came back and gave a series, did a whole lecture series for 2 years at MIT on this. And I ended up spinning out an institute called Systems Health, where I actually teach people how to see the body as a system using a whole different language. The reason I give that background is that when you look at it that way, you start realizing that all disease is actually one disease and has one cure, which is food. Food is medicine. That's what Hippocrates said. And when the body, the other principle is when the body is as its own homeostasis, it takes care of itself, Dave. So your body has a very different homeostasis than my body does, Dave. When we find out the right operational mode of you versus me, our body essentially takes care of itself. In fact, for my Senate campaign, I have a tool that I did that I give to people. It's called Your Body, Your System, and I give them a book which actually teaches them the principles. Out of 50 years, they can learn. They don't have to go to MIT. They can learn control systems principles. And what you find is a goal of health is to bring your body back to its homeostasis. Dysfunctions from that result in what we call disease. Sometimes it's cancer. Sometimes it's heart disease. What I'm saying is these are names that Western medicine assigns to a dysfunction from your own homeostasis. You follow?
Yes.
And
yes.
some people it shows up as cancer. Other people it could show up as Alzheimer's. Other people it could show up as, osteoarthritis. But the fundamental issue is the inflammatory response mechanisms of the body, which is the immune system. That's why I say the immune system is the operating system. If you take care of that, your immune system is in check. It comes in and it takes care of the rest of your body. So when you say, what is cancer, right? Cancer is a process of your body not working, cells that are supposed to die don't die, which is called apoptosis, and then cells start proliferating. Well, why does that happen? Well, you find out that a substantial amount of this is related to sugar, okay? High quantities of a high sugar diet. Cancer loves sugar. It feeds off of it. So it's feeding yourself the wrong things, by way of example. And it's not taking in the right things. So many of these diseases are dysfunctions of the same fundamental elements, but gone wrong because of maybe your particular genetics are a little bit different. Okay. I just wrote a paper in Nature Neuroscience. We took all the major neurovascular diseases and we laid them out, and you see all these things that people call ALS or Alzheimer's or whatever the name you give to them. They're all dysfunctions in sort of common modules at the molecular level. But pharma loves to make something a new name, right? When polio ended, there's a big argument that says, now we have other diseases which sort of look and smell like polio, right? Muscular dystrophy, people are paralyzed. You see what I'm saying? So they recategorize many of these diseases because the manifestations of them were different. In polio, the virus comes into you, an overreactive body the cytokines go and attack the myelin sheaths, right? Which could be in your spine. Again, it's not the polio virus went and did that. It was your body. So we need to go back to this very fundamental principle that the motivation, as long as, profit, you can make money from disease. Why do you want to solve the disease? Look at the Susan Komen Foundation, the big breast cancer foundation. They're a multi-billion-dollar organization. She gets a multi-million-dollar pension. Then this is all on the backs of people giving them, with the little pink ribbon. Again, beautiful PR. You got to understand, these guys are masters of public relations. Masters.
Wow.
And so the Henry Wellcome, there's a very interesting article in the London Economics many years ago. You know who Wellcome was? Wellcome Trust, GlaxoSmithKline, one of the biggest pharmaceutical companies. Henry Wellcome grew up in his uncle's drugstore, in England. And his uncle basically said, look, you can sell crap to anyone. All it is marketing. You can sell anything to anyone. And that's what pharma has done. So you have pharma, the fake science, which is owned. Today, scientists are owned, academics, and you have the fake news media. And you can sell crap to anyone. You can create beautiful sounding guy in a white shirt with little spectacle glasses with a little tie, right?
Yeah. No, I agree.
It's theater. It's total theater, man. Total freaking theater.
Dr. Shiva, listen, thank you very much for being on the X22 Report Spotlight. Once again,
Sure.
How can people see all your work and see your campaign information?
Yeah, so 2 sites I'd like to point people to. Dave. One is my personal stuff. If people want to understand, and I still work as a scientist. I do many things, run my company Cytosolve, where we're going after every major quote unquote disease, Systems Health, which is my educational institute for health, and Clean Food Certified. You can go to V as in Victor, A, Shiva.com, vashiva.com. You can see that I work for a living there. But then separate from that, I'm running for United States Senate, and you can go to Shiva, SHIVA, numeral 4, Senate.com. And I think the most important thing, Dave, if I can share with people,
Sure.
when, we rarely have one of us, fighting for one of us. And that's what our campaign in Massachusetts is about. We've had extraordinary, support from all over this country, because what people are recognizing is a guy like me winning a U.S. Senate seat is a win for every working person in this country. And furthermore, we talked about the deep state. I would argue that Massachusetts is the center of the center of the center of the deep state. And if you think about Harvard and MIT are here, every major swamp creature goes through here. This is where their training takes place, whether they end up in DC or the UN. And these people are the multiracial liberal aristocracy. And we have a huge opportunity to win here with someone like me who can articulate, who's authentic, who gets it and understands that the real issue here is truth, freedom, and health. We need freedom. We have to fight for that. And so one of the things I promoted, Dave, is a Digital Rights Act, okay, where we reinvigorate the Postal Service to give us the infrastructure they're supposed to do, okay, for digital rights. We can do a whole talk on that. We need citizen science. We need to ensure that the academics no longer rule science anymore. Anytime that we fund them, that data is public data that we can use to do our own analysis. And then in order to support health, the Health Rights Act says we need to remove all these middlemen, the GPOs and the PBMs, who have just, increased the cost of healthcare by 100x by being middlemen. So I have a very clear program, but it's about truth, freedom, and health. You have to have freedom. You have to be able to execute the scientific method to get to truth, because without truth, we create fake problems and fake solutions like we're seeing here. You create unhealthy people who are basically have lost their strength to even fight for freedom anymore. So our campaign is really about truth, freedom, and health, Dave, and everyone out there should support us, either volunteer or if people give like $25. I actually give them a very nice book teaching them this and a tool that I wrote by myself that they can really understand how the body is a system.
Wow.